From Northern Avenue in Yerevan, this is CivilNet's Daily News Digest. I'm Nյութի, and here are the top stories for Friday, March 21. One Armenian soldier is dead and another wounded on the line of contact in Karabakh. Also, President Serzh Sargsyan has a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Plus, protests by villagers are heated, construction on hydroelectric power plant are suspended, and later, reimagining and reinventing the potential of Gyumri. Nagorno-Karabakh Republic Army Private Arman Khugasyan 20 was killed on Wednesday at the northern border of the line of contact between Karabakh and Azerbaijan. According to the Karabakh Defense Ministry, the incident occurred while Khugasyan was working on a construction project. Another soldier, 19-year-old Varastad Zakharyan, was injured in the incident and transported to hospital. The president of Nagorno-Karabakh, Bako Sahakyan, posthumously awarded Arman Khugasyan with the Service in Battle Medal for Courage. The Karabakh Army's investigative service confirmed late yesterday that an investigation into the incident has been launched. President Serzh Sargsyan had a telephone conversation with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. This, according to a statement on Sargsyan official website. The two men discussed a number of issues, including Armenian-Russian bilateral relations, Armenia's accession to the customs union, and the events unfolding in Ukraine. The statement read, "The President's shared opinion regarding the crisis in Ukraine and the ways out of it. In that context, the Presidents touched upon the situation after the referendum in Crimea and stated that the latter constitutes yet another case of the exercise of people's right to self-determination via free expression of will. At the same time, the Presidents highlighted the importance of commitment to the norms and principles of the international law, first and foremost the UN Charter." The statement goes on to say that the Presidents also discussed the prospects of the Karabakh settlement. In the meantime, U.S. Ambassador to Armenia John Heffern said that he regretted that Armenia made such a statement during a NATO-supported conference in Yerevan on NATO's partnership in the South Caucasus. Heffern said that NATO and the U.S. tried to find a peaceful settlement of the Ukrainian crisis and that U.S. leaders tried to offer numerous options which went unheeded. Ukraine's ambassador to Armenia, Ivan Kukhta, said that although he is aware of the Armenian president's position regarding the referendum in Crimea that resulted in its incorporation into Russia, he believes that relations between Armenia and Ukraine will continue to develop in all directions. The Ukrainian envoy said this during a press conference in Yerevan yesterday. Kukhta refrained from publicly criticizing Armenia's position to accept the results of the disputed referendum and said that every state has the right to express its position. Meanwhile, the parliamentary faction leader of the Nationalist Party Svoboda, Oleg Tyanghnibok, demanded that Ukraine's ambassadors to Kazakhstan and Armenia be recalled. In his speech in the Ukrainian Rada on March 20, Tyanghnibok said, "Today we are seeing how some countries have begun to recognize the annexation of Crimea. This is unacceptable. We demand that our ambassadors in Kazakhstan and Armenia be immediately recalled." Gaha Energy has announced that the construction of a hydroelectric power plant in the village of Ohanavan in the Arakadzodin Mars has been suspended. As we had reported yesterday, several villages in Arakadzodin had shut down the Yerevan-Ashtarak highway on March 19. They were protesting against the construction of a hydroelectric power plant on the Abaran water basin, which they fear will harm their crops. In a statement released on March 20, the company announced, "We have taken into consideration the concerns several residents of the villages of Garbi and Ohanavan have expressed. Hence, the company has decided to halt all construction immediately in Ohanavan. Our work has fallen under unnecessary and unjustified speculation. We would like to state that the villagers' interests, ensuring smooth irrigation and the development of those villages where Gaha Energy operates, are a priority for us. Time will show that it is not possible to deceive the villager who works on his soil. It is the villager who will be the main benefactor and defender of this energy plan. We believe in its integrity. Gaha Energy is ready to talk with any concerned party." The Dem.am civic initiative, which has been protesting the pension reform in the country, held a car rally through central Yerevan yesterday. The objective of the rally was to inform residents about the March 22 rally to be held in Yerevan's Liberty Square to continue protesting the controversial measure that went into force on January 1 of this year. The four opposition parties in parliament, as well as a number of other civil society organizations, will be joining the demonstration. 2 days ago, Prime Minister Tikran Sarkisyan called on Dem.am to begin a dialogue about the pension reform. However, the members of DEM declined, saying that they would be ready to discuss alternative configurations of the law only when the mandatory component is abolished. CivilNet will be live streaming the protest tomorrow. In economic news, Armenia's National Statistical Service has released macroeconomic indicators for February. According to the state body, economic activity for the first 2 months was 2.4% compared to 8.8% from the previous year. Electricity production fell by 4.4%. External trade turnover totaled $819 million, contracting by 3.2%. This was conditioned by a decrease in import and export volumes. Imports decreased by 6.7% and exports by 3.2%. There was some growth in the construction sector, about 1.2%, and 4.9% growth in agricultural output. Services also grew by 3.8%. It is noteworthy that while the inflation rate was 4.6% and average monthly salaries grew by 6.5%, domestic trade grew only by 4.4%. For January-February 2014, the average monthly salary was $380, 330 for civil servants, which is an increase of 5.3%, and $450 for the private sector, which is an increase of 8%. The centennial of the First World War, which is being commemorated this year, has particular significance for Armenians around the world, and not only because of the genocide. The Armenian National Archive, along with its French counterpart, is preparing an online exhibition that will feature photos and documents about the Armenian Legion's operations within the French Army. The Armenian Legion was established in 1916 through a bilateral agreement and under the goals of the Armenian Liberation Movement. Initially, it was called the Eastern Legion and later renamed the Armenian Legion in 1919. In total, there were 6 battalions, each containing 800 volunteers. Armenian committees organized the conscription process to recruit soldiers in France and the US. 95% Armenian in composition, the Legion included Ottoman Armenian refugees, former prisoners of war, and permanent residents of Egypt, America, and Europe. The majority of soldiers were recruits from the Armenian American community or survivors of the Battle of Musadag who were living in refugee camps in Port Said, Egypt. The director of the National Archives said the exhibition will be available on the websites of the National Archives of both countries, as well as the websites of the French Embassy in Armenia and the French Foreign Ministry. And a book, Armenia's Participation in World War I, will be published. Amaduni Virabian also said that the archive will compile a list of the names of Armenian genocide victims. Some of Istanbul's most prominent intellectuals came together on March 18 to stand in solidarity with Sevan Nishanyan, an Armenian civic activist and well-known linguist who has been imprisoned in Turkey since January 2 of this year. The event in Istanbul's Cezayir Hall was organized by Said Chetanoglu and Hrant Gasparyan, members of the newly formed International Committee for Freedom and Justice for Sevan Nishanyan. Participating in the event were Etienne Mahchoubian, Osman Kavala, Ali Nessin, and many of Nishanyan's friends and relatives, including his son Tavid. Organizers presented a number of Nishanyan's works, including the conditions of his imprisonment. Todd Fabacher has created software around the world, but these days he has one goal in mind: making Gyumri a true tech hub and creating thousands of skilled jobs. I got a chance to speak with Todd about the iGyumri conference, the applications being developed by Digital Pomegranate in Gyumri, industry trends, and how startups in Armenia can be successful. Take a look.
Gyumri, and I explain to people, Gyumri is not that unusual in the world. Everyone's like, oh, you know, it's this, it's the government. I'm like, look, Detroit just went bankrupt. They have more money in that area, billions of dollars, and they still. The core issue is those factories are never coming back. And it's not just Armenia. It's
turn the
all
page
around
and move on.
It's turn the page,
right.
Let's move on, let's focus on things. And as I said, everyone is like, yes.
To watch the full interview, you can follow the link on your screen. The exchange rate is up on your screen as we take a look at your forecast. Yerevan will be expecting rain and will have a high of 13 and a low of -1. Gyumri will have a high of 5 and a low of -5. The capital of Artsakh, Stepanakert, will have a high of 14 and a low of 2. And our travel forecast takes us to Isfahan, Iran, where the high will be 17 and the low 3 degrees Celsius. The Armenian community in Iran, and especially Isfahan, has left a lasting impression on modern Iranian culture. In the 17th century, Safavid Persian king Shah Abbas relocated the Armenian population from Julfa Nakhichevan and brought them to Iran. According to contemporary records, Persian troops led by Shah Abbas assisted in saving the Armenian population from Ottoman persecution, while other accounts claim that the Armenians were moved by force. Regardless, the Armenians of Julfa had a reputation for being exceptional silk traders and merchants. In 1604, Shah Abbas created a luxurious new neighborhood in his capital of Isfahan, specifically for the relocated Armenians, and called it New Julfa, in honor of the city they came from. Attaching the neighborhood to the royal grounds was the Siosepol Bridge, one of the most elegant structures of Safavid Persia. Shah Abbas's intention was that the Armenian merchants would help boost his empire's economy. Thus, the newly settled Armenians became artisans and traders. Within a short period of time, the Armenian community of Isfahan had 24 churches and over 50,000 inhabitants. Between the 17th and 20th centuries, the Armenians of Julfa came to dominate Persian international trade, having a trade network stretching from Manila to Amsterdam to even Acapulco. Armenians were extensively involved with trade in countries such as India, Bangladesh, Hong Kong, and Singapore. New Julfa was also an important center for the early days of printing. Many New Julfa Armenians contributed to both Armenian and Persian cultures. Prominent figures include Diana Apgar, the ambassador of Japan for Armenia and possibly the first female in any diplomatic post, Mesrop Jacob Seth, professor of classical Armenian, painter Sumpat Der-Gyuregyan, and Alenush Deryan, known as the mother of modern Iranian astrology. Today, New Julfa is still known as Isfahan's Armenian neighborhood, having a largely Armenian population. Although Armenians have to follow Iranian Islamic law, they retain their Armenian language, culture, and traditions. Armenian schools and churches still function and serve the community. And that is our digest for this Friday, March 21. We leave you today with the music of the Rastak Ensemble. Have a safe and pleasant weekend, and I will see you back here on Monday.